An article in the fall 2024 edition of the Long Trail News outlined the Green Mountain Club's method for legally protecting the Long Trail and conserving its corridor. This got me thinking about the surroundings I enjoy when I'm backpacking. Maybe a footpath in the wilderness isn't what every trail should be. There are different ways to backpack. I've backpacked a number of places in the U.S. Vermont, New Hampshire, Virginia, Colorado, Arizona, California, Washington, all of them in wild areas. Not to say that long-distance hiking trails don't go through towns. The AT transits through several even reasonably large downtowns. My experience in the U.S. hasn't been with any of that. I've only backpacked for up to a week and chosen to go in those wild areas, not continuous long-distance hiking trails. I certainly enjoy the wilderness and find immense joy when I can be on top of a mountain peak and not see a single road, house, or ski trail. In May of 2023, I went on a very different type of backpacking trip, along the southern half of the Offa's Dyke Trail along the Welsh-English border. This trail, which largely consists of connecting footpaths through farm fields and patches of forest, also meanders through small villages, farmyards, a few decent-sized towns, and a number of short sections on reasonably busy roads. The one day included a 10-mile hike along an exposed ridgeline, and there are more trails in the UK that include some of this. With most people hiking B&B to B&B, often with their overnight stuff transported for them, our backpacking was atypical, though we saw a few others camping at caravan parks each night. With grocery stores in most of the towns we stayed at, it felt much more like a bike trip. For example, we had yogurt for breakfast every morning. We could have taken more advantage of available food, with some of the days having a pub or other place you could purchase prepared food partway along the route. Some of the other walkers used these for the lunches when they were available. Going through this rural countryside, stopping at churches, crossing sheep and cow pastures, a whole different kind of beauty from what is found in the American wild. Given that this trail is among where people live, noticing my surroundings, I got an appreciation for the culture in a way that you just would not in the wilderness. I'm not advocating that the Long Trail should include more elements of civilization in its route. The Green Mountain Club has made the decision to keep the trail in the wild, with them working to conserve a predominantly natural 1,000-foot wide corridor centered on the trail. I do agree that having a trail threading its way through a subdivision of 1-acre lots is not where I'd want to be hiking, but maybe all woods isn't the answer either. The Green Mountain Club has recognized this to a degree. In addition to cleared viewpoints, they maintain 24 open meadows on the Long Trail and Appalachian Trail in Vermont. These make up a very small percentage of the trail. In the early part of the 20th century, when the Long Trail was originally being built, Vermont was more agrarian and had considerably less tree cover. The trails, threaded through stretches of active agricultural fields, affording hikers sweeping views and a connection with the local community. I also remember reading that the original route was not as continuously along the spine of the Green Mountains as it is today, though any stone walls you find deep in the woods show the former extent of agriculture. Given the trail's location today, along those mountains, without large route changes, I think there is limited ability to integrate it into society. I don't think that there is really any of the human-scale agriculture and idyllic rural working landscape with dense clustered villages and very limited rural sprawl in the U.S. that really brought the beauty to the walk on Offa's Dyke. I also must acknowledge that the landscape I see every day does not feel special to me, but may to others. Vermont is a tourist state with many people visiting to see our landscape. One thing I've heard, and agree with, is that a lot of Vermont's beauty, particularly when compared to New Hampshire, comes from the openings in our landscape, farm fields both in the valleys and on the hillsides and hilltops. It may be the comparison to a bike trip is very apt. A multi-day bike trip of rail trails and side roads might be the closest you can get to the experience I had on Offa's Dyke in the U.S. though I think you'll miss something not learning to tell whether a field is grazed or mowed based on how the ground feels under your feet, or negotiating the different types of gaits and styles, or the things you just notice at a walking pace, like the type of catch basin grates in the towns. Okay, I'm a civil engineer. There's a growing movement of instant urban trails, connecting together parks and existing pedestrian ways in a similar way that existing footpaths were connected together to make the Offa's Trail. Also, in planning, the Velomont, a low-elevation, mountain bike-focused multi-use trail to run the length of Vermont, intends to connect into villages. Though it is recognized there will need to be sections on roads to get into the town centers. Understandably, roads are considered least desirable. But in their planning documents, farmland and housing adjacent off-trail sections are considered less desirable than in the forest. In building a new trail, I suspect forest would be the easiest to get a trail on, both because of state, national, and municipal forests, but also because even private landowners, the forest sections are likely to be larger sections owned by a single landowner, and landowners, just because of the culture in Vermont and where trails are already existing, I think would be much more willing to let trails occur in their forests, which may only be occasionally logged, as opposed to agricultural land, which is used more frequently and a trail could have a bigger impact on. My initial impression is that towns in Vermont that are big enough to sustain a night stop of the type we had on Offa's Dyke, with camping or a hotel plus a grocery store, are too far apart. But then I remembered the quite substantial distances we covered, between 13 and 23 miles each of our 6 days of hiking, for a total of just under 100 miles over those days. The treadway, though some days included significant elevation, was much easier to walk than a hiking trail. And not every town had a grocery store. Some nights, many of the people staying in B&Bs had to take car transportation off the trail to and from their accommodations. I also need to remember, if a trail becomes popular, amenities will develop. I see that with the recently opened Lamoille Valley Rail Trail. If given the choice to only do in-society UK-style walking or American wilderness backpacking, I would choose Yosemite, the White Mountains, or even the Green Tunnel of the Shenandoahs in the Green Mountains. However, I'm very glad to have experienced the farm fields, hedges, garden back walls, and maybe not the B roads of Wales and England, and want to do it again at some point. I recommend it to American backpackers to see a different cultural experience of traversing the land. I don't think having wilderness backpacking is bad or that we shouldn't have more of it, but I've found value in backpacking in a non-wilderness setting.